senior Metropolitan Police Chief has defended the actions of his force, saying he was not pressured by the government into cracking down on protesters during the coronation. Temporary Assistant Commissioner Matt Twist has been answering questions from a committee of MPs following criticism of the way officers handled demonstrators in light of the government's new Public Order Act that became law in the week of the King's crowning.
I felt under no pressure politically. I felt pressure to deliver a safe and secure operation, but that was because of the fact it was a once-in-a-lifetime event for so many people, and there would be hundreds of thousands of people in London to celebrate it. The stakes were enormously high, so I absolutely felt pressure to deliver a safe and secure operation. But that wasn't political pressure, that was the pressure to do a good job.
Ironically, though, the hearing about the best way to police demonstrations had to be briefly suspended when it was interrupted by a Just Stop Oil protester.
You usually use a combination lock to stop.
We're here today because our democracy.
Come on, officer. Come on, officer. Do your job. Come on, officer. No, we're not having this. Come on, officer.
OK, it did go back to the proceedings, but they were interrupted for that Just Stop Oil protester. Let's bring in our crime correspondent, Martin Brunt. He's been watching the whole thing. It was extraordinary, wasn't it? The level of detail that we heard in that hearing was fascinating.
It was indeed, and fascinating detail from both sides. First, the Metropolitan Police Assistant Commissioner, Matt Twist, we've just heard a bit from, but he went into great detail about how the intelligence picture, the threat of disruption, built up overnight. I mean, we haven't been privy to what the police were getting, but it was enough, he said, for senior officers to have to brief the Home Secretary and the Mayor of London late on the Friday night. But he talked about the threat of people throwing paint. They arrested some people carrying white paint, but the fear was that they were going to spray monuments. There was intelligence, he said, that people were going to jump onto the procession route and interrupt him, and there were other bits of intelligence that suggested people wanted to set off loud noises and scare the horses, which could have caused, he said, very serious injury. So that was from the police, from the protesters, particularly those subjected to the first use of those very new powers on the day, particularly those Republic anti-monarchists. They were held for 16 hours on suspicion of planning to lock themselves to objects or to each other and cause major disruption. We heard from Graham Smith, one of those arrested, the chief executive of Republic, who said that the weeks and months of liaising with the Metropolitan Police and laying out their plans and saying there was no intention to cause any disruption, none of that counted for anything on the day. This is what he said.
Immediately, we were surrounded by large numbers of tactical support group officers who were not in remotely friendly or helpful mindset. They immediately told us to stop what we were doing. I attempted to phone the liaison officer, and he told me that he was therefore detaining me and did not allow me to do that. I attempted again, and he seized my wrist and removed my phone from my hand, and again told me I could not do that. I told him that we had had these meetings with a superintendent and a civil commander. He said, what was the name of that person? I told him. He clearly recognised that name, and he said that did not matter.
The senior police officer, Matt Twist, said he still felt that those arrests were lawful. The force hasn't apologised for them, but it said it regretted that those that were held for so many hours were prevented from taking part in the protest. We heard too from a volunteer, one of those other group of individuals who were arrested on the Friday night. Susie Melvin was a volunteer working for Westminster Council. She and her colleagues were looking after vulnerable people, making sure they got home safely in the early hours of Saturday morning. They were suddenly swooped on, she said. Their bags were searched for no apparent reason, and they'd been in the process of handing out rape alarms, but the police appeared to interpret that as, preparing for some kind of protest, as I said earlier, about scaring horses. So there was some fascinating detail. And towards the end, we heard from human rights lawyer Adam Wagner, who said that the real danger of these new police powers was that it was upsetting democracy, and the notion of peaceful protest was becoming radicalised.